Hi, I'm Isha Cogborn, President and CEO of Epiphany Institute. And the purpose of Epiphany Institute is to help you to connect your purpose and your passion with your profession. So thank you for joining us today for this webinar, 5 Rules to Win, Being You. Now, our hopes is that by watching and actively participating in this webinar, that you will learn how to maximize your strengths, to minimize your weaknesses, and to create a powerful personal brand that will open up new opportunities for you, that will allow you to be successful based on your personal definition of success. But before we jump in, let me tell you a little bit about who I am and what led me to sharing this information with you here today, because I think it's very important. It's something that I'm passionate about. So that right there is me when I was about 8 years old. And I'll tell you, that medal around my neck, it isn't for anything remotely related to athletics. It is from the reading Olympics. In fact, I was a bit of a nerd. I loved school, except for gym class. I absolutely hated gym class. For me, gym class brought out every insecurity and inability imaginable all in front of an audience. Think about that for a second. Do you have any gym classes in your life? Are there any situations or scenarios, perhaps a development opportunity, a role that you've been avoiding because you're afraid that it will allow all of those insecurities or things that you're not confident that you're able to do, that those things are going to bubble up to the surface? Well, if you're experiencing that, I know exactly how you feel because I dealt with it myself. And what I'm hoping to do today is to help you to build confidence so that you don't allow those fears, or if there are things that you need to bone up on, areas that you need to improve, that those things aren't getting in the way of what it is that you want to accomplish. Your gym class. Now that's me when I was a senior in high school, getting ready to graduate and go off to journalism school. And my classmates voted me most likely to succeed. And I had this great life plan. You know, I was going to graduate from high school, go on to college, graduate, start a successful career in journalism, get married at 25, have my first child at 27, and second one at 29. You know, we all have those great plans, right? Well, my life didn't exactly go according to that plan. In fact, the week after I got to college, I found out that I was pregnant and ended up dropping out after just a semester. And that was not anybody's idea of most likely to succeed. So I gave birth to this gorgeous young man right here. This is my son, Dion. And we had started just a regular, normal life. After I came home from school, I moved back in with my parents and went on to move into my own place a week after he was born. And when you're voted most likely to succeed, you don't think that your first place is going to be government subsidized housing, but it was. It just is what it is, right? So, you know, we were living very modestly. I had a job making not too far above minimum wage, no benefits. But we had a roof over our head, we had food on the table, and I was content. Our needs were met. And although I was starting to settle into this life, there was a part of me that wouldn't allow me to get too comfortable, because I couldn't help but to feel like there was something more that I was supposed to be doing with my life. And I was at work one day in the pager store. That's right, I sold pagers for a living, is what I was doing. And I was in the pager store one day. I was in the store by myself. And as I was sitting at the register, I heard a voice very clearly say to me, "You're not supposed to be a regular person." And I knew exactly what that meant. And within a month, I had solidified plans to go back to college. My son was a year old at the time, and so we went back away, 3.5 hours away from home. And I went on to finish my degree just a couple of days after his 5th birthday. And after I graduated, I got a job with a Fortune 50 global corporation. And it was a big company, and I was in a big role. I was the employee communications manager for the site's largest facility in Texas. So traveled all the way from my hometown of Mount Clemens, Michigan, down to Freeport, Texas, which is where we were working. And, it was a bit intimidating because I had colleagues who were doing the same role that I was doing across the country, who had been with the company longer than I had been alive. And so I knew going in, there's no way that I could approach the role the same way that they did, because I just didn't have that experience. I just didn't have that knowledge. And so what I had to do was to figure out what I was bringing to the table, how I could approach that role in a way that still brought value to the company and to the individuals who were looking to me for support. And so that's what I did. And it worked because I would receive multiple promotions and new assignments. Ended up moving back to Michigan, back to corporate headquarters in another great role, and spent almost a decade with the company. And then at the height of the recession in 2009, I was downsized, just like lots of other people in my company and lots of other people in lots of other companies during that time period. And what that allowed me to do, although it's something that could have been seen as a huge obstacle, it allowed me to step back and to think about what I really wanted, what success really was for me. Because although I had come a long way from subsidized housing and food stamps and working almost minimum wage, I still didn't feel like I had achieved what that voice said to me when it said, you're not supposed to be a regular person. Because although I had a great salary and a great job, I still felt like a regular person. This wasn't what I was put here to do, and I knew that. And so on January 14, 2009, I was laid off. And on January 15, 2009, I ordered new business cards and started Epiphany Institute. And starting the company ended up being a wonderful thing for me because it did allow me to fulfill those things that really I'd held in my heart since I was that 8-year-old little girl who hated gym class. I started speaking across the country. I wrote a book by the same name of this workshop, 5 Rules to Win Being You. I'm on television, I'm on the radio, I've been in national magazines, and I've gotten to meet some really wonderful and accomplished people like you see here, Dr. Maya Angelou, who we certainly miss. And it has been a wonderful thing for me. And when I look back at my life, it's been a roller coaster ride. There have been very high highs and there have been very low lows, as I know many of you can appreciate. But one thing that I can say through all of those experiences is that I never felt like the things that I wanted were out of my grasp, as long as I stepped back and took the time to figure out what it was that I did want. And one thing that I did realize as I've gone across the country coaching and speaking is that everybody doesn't feel that way. And one thing that I see a lot, and I see this in companies, I see it with individuals who are entrepreneurs, is that you can have someone within a company who is very talented, who is delivering great results, but it seems like they're always getting passed over. It seems like the great opportunities always go to someone else. You may have an entrepreneur who will look at someone else's business and know that they have a better product or service, but they're struggling while other people in business are succeeding. And so it led me to ask the question, why do some people succeed while other equally talented people don't? And that's a question that just continued to rise to the surface of my mind over and over again, and I had to find the answer. And it's really easy to chalk it up to the isms, right? We could say, well, it's racism, or it's sexism, or it's ageism, or it's classism, or it's nepotism. And not to say that those things don't exist, but what I wanted to know is why, when you look at two individuals and look at the things that are within their control, why is it that one seems to have all the opportunities, seems to have the success within their reach while other people don't. And so what you're going to see here today, what we're going to talk about, is the results of what I found out and how you can benefit from what I discovered. So, and I keep going back to the same slide. Let's talk about today's focus. So there are three things we're really going to look at focusing on today. Number one is building confidence and clarity around your talents, abilities, and potential. And that goes back to the purpose of Epiphany Institute, why we exist. We're going to talk about creating a strong, authentic personal brand. And we're going to talk about strategies for creating mutually beneficial professional relationships. And that's important to discuss. So let's jump on in. And if you haven't done so already, make sure that you download the learning guide that is here in the webinar. So it looks like this. The heading on it is My Tale of the Tape, because at a point very soon in this webinar, we're going to take a break and I want you to answer some of the questions that are there. And then you'll also have a homework assignment that is there in the learning guide. So make sure you download that because you will need it. So, all right, let's jump right in. So rule number one, 5 rules to win being you, use your tape to differentiate. Now, if you've ever seen a boxing match, you know that in the beginning, there is something that the commentators do called the tail of the tape. And so they look at both fighters and they really compare them head to head. They look at their height, they look at their weight, they look at the circumference of their arms. That seems, or their wrist, seems really random, right? But it's not random. It's important. And one thing you'll discover is if you look at each fighter's tail of the tape, you'll notice that each has what I call unfair competitive advantages. Now, why do you call it unfair, Aisha? Well, I'm glad you asked. I call it unfair because these are the things that the fighters didn't have to work at, but it's a clear advantage for them in the ring. So if one fighter is a foot taller than the other, that's an unfair competitive advantage because you can't train to be taller. You just are. If you could train to be taller, I would not be 5'2.5". It just is what it is. And so as you look at the tail of the tape for each fighter, you'll start to notice advantages, unfair competitive advantages that one fighter has over the other. So if you look at this slide here, this is the tail of the tape from a fight a few years ago between Manny Pacquiao and Sugar Shane Mosley. And if you look at each of the data points, it seems like Sugar Shane Mosley has more unfair competitive advantages than Manny Pacquiao. But if you saw that fight, then you know that Manny Pacquiao won. And one of the things that's so wonderful about the tail of the tape is that it isn't just a numbers game. It isn't a matter of who has more advantages over the other person. Because all it takes is one advantage for someone to win. So if you look at the tail of the tape here again between Manny Pacquiao and Sugar Shane Mosley, one unfair competitive advantage that you'll see that rests with Manny Pacquiao is his age. He is, or at the time of this fight, he was 30 years old and Sugar Shane Mosley was 38. Now, this is not saying that youth is an unfair competitive advantage in every situation, but boxing is a sport of stamina. And although Sugar Shane Mosley may have been in great shape, his youthfulness allowed him to be in better shape in this situation, and he probably trained a little harder, and that's a contributing factor to it as well. But that was a clear advantage for him in this fight. And when it comes down to your tail of the tape, you may look at yourself and say, okay, well, I don't have the education that someone has, but that is probably why if you're a student here at West, you're working on closing that deficiency. But you may look at someone else who's perhaps going for the same role that you're going for, or who has the same type of business that you have. And you may feel like, well, I don't have everything going for me that they have going for them. But all it takes is one strong, unfair competitive advantage and knowing how to use it to benefit the people who you serve in order to win. to win being you. So let's talk about your tail of the tape. So in this case, and this is something that I use with all of my clients and almost every time I speak because I believe that it's that important, is to figure out your tail of the tape. So in this case, TAPE is an acronym that I created that stands for your talents, abilities, passions, and experiences. Now your talents, those are the things that you're just naturally gifted at. You don't have to work at it. It just comes naturally to you. You're just good at it. It's that area where, you just seem to flow. And one of the things that's challenging sometimes about figuring out your talents is because they come to you so naturally, you don't really think it's a big deal. And some people have talents that are what I call showy talents. They're things that, you can see with the naked eye. If someone is a great singer or an artist, or they have extreme intelligence, those are things that it's easy to pick up on what their talent is right away, right? But there are some of us who have talents that aren't is visible to the naked eye. Maybe you're really good at taking complex subjects and boiling them down so that everyone can understand them. Maybe you're a peacemaker. You're able to get everyone on the same page. There are things that, maybe they don't get you on the front page of a newspaper or a magazine, but these talents are just as important as any other talent. In fact, the only talent that isn't important is the talent that doesn't get utilized. Think about that for a minute. Because you may be sitting on some talents right now that you're not using. And if so, it doesn't really matter if it's not being put to good use for someone else. So that's the T in the tail of the tape, your talents. Now let's talk about the A, which is your abilities. Now your abilities are different from your talents in that your talents are the things that you're naturally good at, and abilities are things that you've worked to be good at. And for the purposes of this exercise, when we talk about your abilities, we aren't talking about those, things that you can just, kind of juggle and do. We're not talking about the jack of all trades, master of none stuff. But we want to focus on those abilities that really serve as a competitive advantage for you. You've developed a level of mastery that's fairly strong in these areas. So that's your abilities. And then the P stands for your passions. What is it that gets you really, really excited or makes you really, really angry? What are those things that you're willing to go out and protest about in the cold, in the freezing rain, or you're willing to write a big check for, give your last dollar out of your bank account to support? Or you can even discover your passions by noticing what area of the bookstore that you always go to when you enter it. Or what is that thing that you can completely lose yourself in? And here's one of those cliche questions, but it always gets asked because it's an effective question. If you had to work every day for the rest of your life, what would you do if you weren't going to collect a paycheck? Or here's another variation on that same question. Imagine that everybody got the exact same salary no matter what they did. What would you choose to do? So answering that question may give you some insight on what you're passionate about. Now let's talk about the E in TAPE, and that's perhaps one of the most important and overlooked things when it comes down to really figuring out what your purpose is or how you can deliver at a very high level. A lot of the other questionnaires and personality surveys and assessments deal with things around your talents and your passions, but the experiences piece, that's something that's unique to the tail of the tape. And when we talk about your experiences, that certainly includes your work experience, your educational experience, but it also includes your life experiences, because our life experiences really shape the way that we see the world, the lenses that we view the world through. And that's important. So to give you an example of how our experiences shape the way that we see the world, think about a police car driving through your neighborhood. Now, the neighborhood that I grew up in as a child, if I saw a police car driving through the neighborhood, people might have felt a bit threatened because that was just the experience of our neighborhood. And a neighborhood that I live in now, if I see a police car drive through the neighborhood, it makes me feel safe because I feel like, okay, they're making sure that there isn't any crime taking place. So neither of those situations or views are right or wrong. It all depends on your experiences, right? And we don't have to look any further than, looking at the events that are happening in the world today, the Eric Garners and the Ferguson, Missouri situations and the way that people interpret those events are often based on their experiences and the lens that they see the world through. Now, this is very important when it comes to your tale of the tape, because the way that we see the world often helps us to define problems and to address them differently. And that is a competitive advantage for you. And so go ahead now, and I want you to grab your learning guide here and pause the webinar and take a couple of minutes and write down your tale of the tape. What are your talents, your abilities, your passions, and your experiences? And this is not a time to be modest because modesty is not going to help you to get to the core of who you are. So go ahead and brag on yourself a little bit. You're allowed to do that here. And even with your experiences, some of the experiences that have shaped who we are and the way that we see the world are not so pleasant, okay? Let's just be honest. If you had a hard time in school, perhaps you were picked on or you were bullied or you weren't very popular, or, you dealt with abuse or, other situations, those may be things that we don't want to think about when it comes to our lives. However, if those unfortunate incidents have shaped the way that you see the world or shaped the way that you relate to people, then it's something that is worth taking a look at when it comes to your tale of the tape. Because if it shaped the way that you see the world or relate to people, then it can be used as an unfair competitive advantage. Even those things that are unpleasant can be turned around and used for your good and for the good of the people that you work with and that you have the ability to help in this life. So that's a great thing. That's a great thing there. So go ahead, pause the webinar, and identify your tale of the tape. All right, so now you've written down your tale of the tape, and this is how it works. When you look at your tape, it is as unique as your fingerprint. And there may be people who have the same education as you, who come to the job interview in the same great suit that you have on, but no one can match your tape because that's who you are. And when you figure out your tape, it will give you clues about your purpose, about your callings, and about the way that you can deliver value in your career and even in your personal life and volunteer activities and other things that you may be doing in a way that other people just can't. And that was how I managed to be successful at 22, 23 years old, coming into a role where there were people in the company that had been there longer than I had been alive. I used my tape to tailor that role to me and to my strengths, to maximize my strengths, minimize my weaknesses, to be able to perform well. And so when you look at your tape, then you ask yourself, well, how can I use my tape to make a bigger difference at work, at home, and in my community? Because this knowledge doesn't matter if it doesn't help someone else. We don't go through life just being selfish and out for, good just for the purpose of having stuff and being successful. It doesn't matter if we're not helping someone. And so your homework, you don't have to do this right now, but your homework is to take a look at your tape. Look at your role now. Look at the job or your business right now. Look at where you want your career to go. And think about how can you use your tape to make a bigger difference. Got it? Got it. All right. Now let's move on to rule number 2. Build your authentic personal brand. Now, I love this definition of branding because sometimes when we think about branding, we think about, a logo or colors or just making sure that everything looks the same, or commercials or advertising, right? But branding is so much more than that. This definition of branding that I love so much says that branding is the recognition of a personal connection that forms in the hearts and minds of customers and key audiences through their accumulated experience at every point of contact. Now, I'm just going to spend a little bit of attention on the words that are in red here in this definition because they're very important. So branding, in your personal brand, because that's the thing, businesses have brands, restaurants have brands, products have brands, but you have one too. And so when it comes down to your personal brand, we have to recognize that it's about a personal connection that forms in people's hearts and in their minds. So when people are deciding how they feel about us, and if they think that we're qualified, or if they want to give us their business or not, it isn't just based on data. It's also based on connections that are made in their hearts as well. I mean, just think about this. How many of us buy products because there's some positive connection that we have to a memory or an experience from some point in our lives? There's a brand of lotion that I like because it reminds me of my grandmother. There are certain places that I like to go because it reminds me of really happy times in my childhood or other points in my life. So that's that recognition of a personal connection that's there. And when we talk about that accumulated experience, that means that a brand isn't just built on one impression. And thank goodness for that, right? Because how many of you have ever made a mistake before? I know I have. But when you made a mistake, did you get fired right away just from one little mistake? Well, chances are if you stayed there, it's because the accumulated experience that your employer had of you outweighed the mistake that you made. And that's good news. A great example of that is, when we look at Toyota, the automaker. Toyota had a 20-plus year history in America of, building quality, dependable, safe vehicles. And a few years ago, back around, 2009, 2010 or so, they experienced, I think it was 2009, they experienced some safety recalls. And there were big issues, big recalls. And there were congressional hearings on Capitol Hill trying to figure out how this happened, right? It was a big deal. And it did impact Toyota, but not that much, just a little bit. And at the time, they were the #1 automaker in the country. Here and I'm from Detroit, so that's the Motor City. So for a foreign automaker to be the #1 automaker in a country that's known for putting out vehicles, that was a big deal. And so yes, that those recalls had an impact on Toyota's brand, but the negative impact was short-lived because the accumulated experience was positive. And something else to remember when we look at our personal brand is that it is built from every point of contact. So everything that we do either helps to build or to diminish our personal brand. So everything from, if you go out to lunch with someone and they go to get in your car and your car is a mess, does that build or diminish your personal brand? I have, and I'll make a true confession here, I have a tendency to say yes to too many things and to take on too much. And at times, that can cause me to not meet deadlines as quickly as I, committed to initially. That diminishes my personal brand. And so that's something that I know I have to be careful of. And so that makes me have to step back and say, okay, before I commit, is this something that I can handle? Maybe they want this in a week, but will it really take me 3 based upon everything that I have going on? So that is what we need to look at as we are managing our personal brands. These are decisions and actions that we're taking on a day-to-day basis. And you may say to yourself, well, I mean, why is branding so important? And we're going to talk about that in a minute. But one of the biggest things and quickest things that can either strengthen or diminish your personal brand is your use of social media. And, I'm not one of those people that thinks like social media is the devil. I love social media. In fact, when I started building my business, social media was one of the things that I used to grow my platform. And, today I have, tens of thousands of followers throughout my social media vehicles. And a lot of the business that I've gotten has come from Facebook. It's come from LinkedIn. It's come from, other vehicles. And sometimes when we think about people who are misusing social media, we want to put it on young people, right? We say, oh, those teenagers, they're putting stuff out there that they shouldn't put on Facebook. But it isn't just teenagers. Adults have been challenged with this too. And part of it is just because we don't think about the impact of the things that we say and the things that we do on social media. So there was a study that was published by Microsoft, which you can see here on the screen, and 56% of adults surveyed said that they don't actively think about the consequences of their online activities. 56% of people said, I really don't think about it. Maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. So, but of those, think about this, and you have to really synthesize this data. 56% of people said they don't even think about it. But those who have said that they've experienced negative consequences, and this is a falsely low number because, again, most people don't even think about it. 21% of these people said that they were fired from a job because of something that they did on social media. 16% said that they lost out on getting a job or lost health insurance or didn't get into the university that they wanted or were turned down even for a mortgage. And I can tell you personally, when I used to recruit on campuses of colleges and universities for roles that our company had available, once I narrowed it down to my top picks of people that I wanted to interview, the next thing that I did was Google them. I wanted to see what was out there on those individuals. I wanted to take a look at their Facebook pages and their Twitter accounts. And there have been times where there were individuals that I did not interview, even though I thought that they had a decent resume, because of their activity on social media. So put it this way. If you wouldn't want it to show up on your resume during a job interview or in a negotiation meeting with a customer, if you're an entrepreneur, don't put it on social media. Social media is a power tool, and it can be used to build or it can be used to destroy. So use that tool wisely. Now, there are 3 keys that I want to focus on when it comes down to building an authentic personal brand. And the key there is authenticity. We don't just want to create something based on who we think people want us to be, which is the first key. Being who you are and not who you think you should be. I mean, just think about McDonald's. McDonald's is not a gourmet restaurant, and they know it, right? But what McDonald's has built its brand on is consistency. And throughout the United States, whether you go to McDonald's in Des Moines or Detroit, when you order a Big Mac, you're going to get 2 all-beef patties, special sauce, lettuce, cheese, pickles, onions on a sesame seed bun. And the fries are great when they're hot, right? We all know that about McDonald's. But if McDonald's all of a sudden decides that they want to start serving T-bone steaks and crab legs, now we're starting to run into some brand issues. Because maybe they thought, well, this is what we need to do to be able to draw a bigger market. But that rarely works. We see them now, doing the whole McCafe thing. And yeah, those people that already went to McDonald's will probably get coffee or smoothies from McDonald's. But I doubt very seriously that people who were diehard Starbucks customers are leaving Starbucks to go to McDonald's. So be who you are and not who you think you should be. The second key to building an authentic personal brand is to consistently deliver quality results. Make sure that you're maximizing your strengths and minimizing your weaknesses. Now, nobody is good at everything, right? I know I'm not, and I bet you aren't either. And that's okay. Nobody expects you to be good at everything. But when you know what you're good at, the key is to look for opportunities to do more of what you're good at. And when you identify those things that are weaknesses for you, then to either close the gap, if these are things that you have to do, build yourself up to a level of competency. You don't have to necessarily become good at the things that you're naturally bad at, but just make sure that it doesn't impact you in a negative way. And that could be, looking at ways that you can job share or, move some of those things out of your area of responsibility if you know that you're not really good at it. If you're an entrepreneur and you know that you're not good at keeping the books, hire a bookkeeper. Don't destroy your business trying to do something that you're not good at. And so that's what we want to focus on. But again, there will be times that you just can't avoid doing those things that you aren't good at. So what you want to do then is just bring yourself up to a level of competency. But don't spend so much time trying to get good at the things that are naturally weaknesses for you that you aren't focusing on the areas of strength. And that's one of the things that we really have a challenge with here, I'll say, particularly in this country. When we look at performance reviews that a lot of companies do with their employees, they seem to focus heavily on, here are the areas where you need to improve. And so we spend the next year developing plans, taking classes, doing things to get good at the stuff that we're not good at the expense of doing more of the things that we are good at and being able to deliver there. So look again for ways to maximize your strengths and minimize your weaknesses. And then finally, another key to building an authentic personal brand is to make sure that people know what you have to offer. Now, there was a time, and depending on what generation you grew up in, particularly with baby boomers, many of us were taught, hey, you let your work speak for itself. You go in, you do good work, you keep your head down, you don't need to brag, you let your work speak for itself. But if you're waiting for your work to speak for itself, how do you know if someone is actually listening? Now, 20 years ago, within companies, there was a layer within a company of people who just managed people. That was all that they did. They were just supervisors. And so their whole responsibility allowed them to be able to see who's good at what, who's not good, who's strong, who comes to work on time, who delivers, and who doesn't. And based on that, yes, people moved up on their merit. They were able to let their work speak for them. But today, organizations have become a lot more compact, a lot flatter. And so the people who may be responsible for deciding your professional fate also have job responsibilities of their own. They're also on deadline and overworked just like you are. And on top of those responsibilities, they have to do performance reviews and pay planning and succession planning. And your fate is wrapped up in whether or not they've collected enough data or can remember what you've done over the past year or the past 6 months. And so it's your responsibility, not theirs. It's your responsibility to make sure that they understand your talents, they understand what you've delivered, and that you are equipping them to give you the best review possible and to set you up for the opportunities that you really want. And those are the keys to building an authentic personal brand, which is rule number 2 in the 5 rules to win, being you. Now, here's the bottom line. This is the real deal. Decisions aren't always made on merit alone. And, there are those of us who may be a bit more introverted. And, when we come to work, we say, look, I'm not here to make friends. I'm going to come and do my job. And I don't need to talk to people. I don't need to chit chat. I'm doing work. I'm going home. And maybe that works for you. But if you're finding that you're being overlooked for opportunities that you want, or that your business is not growing the way that you want it to grow, then you have to step back and say, how am I being perceived? And it is a reality that people want to work with those that they know, like, and trust. And if you aren't giving people an opportunity to get to know who you are and to build up, again, that personal connection, going back to the definition of what a brand is, if we aren't allowing people to build a personal connection to us, then don't be surprised when you get overlooked for opportunities. Or if you're an entrepreneur and people choose to do business with someone else instead of you. And we may want to say, well, that's just brown-nosing, that's schmoozing, I don't do that. And yes, there can be a level of that is too much. But again, remember, a brand is built both in the mind and in the heart. So make sure that you're giving people those opportunities to connect with you on a personal basis. Now, you can measure how much of that you're sharing with people. It doesn't mean you got to invite your boss over for Thanksgiving dinner, or you got to go to happy hour with your coworkers every night. But allow people in. Let them get to know what a wonderful person you are, so that they'll actually like you in addition to the great results that you deliver. And finally, it's important to remember that your personal brand is currency. It's like money, and it actually transfers into money. All you got to do is to look at someone. If you look at two people who start in an organization at the same time, they get hired in the same role on the same day, they've got the same experience, and one of them puts forth the time and the energy to manage their personal brand, and the other one doesn't. And if you track those people over 20 years, what you will find 9 times out of 10 is that that person that invested the energy into managing their personal brand, their earnings are going to outpace the person that did not significantly. And that not only impacts what's going in their paycheck, then that also rolls over into the impact that they're able to make in their community. It rolls over into the life that they're able to create for their family and their loved ones. Do you get to take your kids on that vacation that they've been dreaming about or not? Are you able to help out your parents as they get older or not? Again, this isn't just about you. You may say, well, I don't care about money. But it's currency, and that currency allows you to do other things that you do care about. And your brand is currency as well. And yes, it will take time and energy to build and manage your brand, but you will find that it is worth it. Now let's take a look at rule number 3. Identify the problems you can confidently solve. Now, why do I say confidently? Because when we're confident, there's just a level of swagger, if you will, that we have that allows us to take chances that may pay off for us in bigger ways than when we're not confident. Now, there are some people that, they just seem to exude confidence. They walk into the room like they own it. And there are some of us that it seems like we just didn't get that gene, right? And so if you're not naturally confident, how can you build it? Well, there are 3 ways that you can build your confidence. One is through knowledge. And if you're a student here at West, then that is what you're doing here. You are building your knowledge so that you can be more confident about the contributions that you're making professionally and otherwise. Another way that you can build your confidence is through results. What is it that you've accomplished? And it may not be results in that particular area that you're working on now, but look back at your life. There was some point in your life where you were presented with an opportunity or a challenge and you didn't know what to do. And if you look back at that now, it's like, oh, I thought that was a big deal at the time, but it really wasn't. Look at what I accomplished. It really wasn't that bad. I was afraid for nothing. And so look back at those results that you've been able to accomplish in different areas of your life and allow that to transfer here as well. And that's why it's really important to document your results because it's easy over time to forget the things that you've accomplished. So make sure that on a regular basis, in some form or fashion, you're keeping track of the contributions that you're making. And that's going to make it a lot easier for you as well when you get ready to update your resume or your CV. You're not having to think back, okay, what have I done over the past 5 years? Because if you're doing that, you're going to forget some stuff. So make sure that you're keeping track of it. And then finally, Another area that will help us to build our confidence is faith. Um, the Bible, which I believe is one of the greatest business and self-help books on the market, tells us faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And so to have faith means, okay, I hope that when I take on this project, things are going to work out and I'm going to deliver the results that the organization is expecting from me. But I really don't know that it's going to happen. I don't have the knowledge or the results. And so I just have to have faith that this is going to work out. I have to have faith in myself that if I give forth 110%, that I'm going to be successful. And I have to have faith in the people around me that when I call on them and when I lean on them for help and support, that they will help me. They'll be open to supporting me, because we can't do this all by ourselves either. So we have to have faith in ourselves, and we also have to have faith in each other. So when we talk about rule number 3, again, it was identifying the problem you can confidently solve. So we talked about confidence, but one of the things that's important to figure out too is, what's the real problem? So let me just give you an example. When my son was young, I was working, probably 55 hours a week. He was playing multiple sports. I was a community volunteer, volunteered in my church. So we were always just running in 10 different directions. And, once every couple of weeks or so, we would go to this place called CC's Pizza when we lived in Texas. And if you've ever been to CC's Pizza, not to knock it, but, I like good pizza. And CC's wasn't necessarily the best pizza out there. But my son and I would, make a point to go to CC's every couple of weeks or so. And so when I look at that and say, well, what problem did CC's Pizza solve for my family? It wasn't that we were hungry, although that may have been, the first thing that would come to mind. You go to a restaurant. Why do you go to a restaurant? Because you're hungry, right? That's what common sense says. It wasn't even that I didn't have time to cook, because we would spend more time in CC's Pizza than we would if I would have gone home and cooked dinner. But the real problem that CC's Pizza solved for my family is that it allowed my son and I to spend quality time together, which was a premium commodity with our schedules. Because when we go to CC's, number one, it's a buffet, so you're going to go back for seconds and maybe thirds, and so you're going to stay longer. And they had video games, and they had TVs with cartoons on. And so where my son, if we were at home and I cooked dinner, he'd scarf down his food in 5 minutes and be upstairs. We didn't really get to spend quality time together that way. So when I went to CC's, our meal typically ended up being 45 minutes to an hour, which was a lot longer than it would have been at home. So the real problem that CC's Pizza solved was that my son and I were challenged spending quality time together. So now take that example, and again, asking yourself, what are the problems that you can confidently solve? So when you've identified, you've built up that confidence, or you're looking at how do you transfer that confidence, make sure that you're identifying what the real problem is. And that's where your T.A.P.E, particularly your experiences, come into play again as well, because it may allow you to define the problem differently than most people, which will allow you to solve it differently than most people, which will allow you to deliver value that most people won't. And that is how you win being you. Now, I want you to remember this. If you don't remember anything else that I say to you today, write this down, tweet it, post it on Facebook, do whatever you got to do. But remember this. Without confidence, you'll always question if you deserve the success you achieve. Without confidence, you'll always question if you deserve the success you achieve. Now, there are some of us who will go on and pursue degree after certificate, after training, and we'll go to conferences and we'll read books and we'll say, I'm doing this to build my knowledge. And that's great, because knowledge is a wonderful thing if you're applying it. But if you continue to gain more knowledge, and as you gain it, you still don't feel like you have what it takes to go after what it is that you want, that may not be a knowledge issue. It's probably a confidence issue. And so use those 3 keys to build your confidence. And at the end of the day, you've just got to step out there and you've got to do it. And if you fail, so what? It's a lot better to try something and have it not work out the way that you expected than to never try it at all and to have to live with what if. Let's talk about rule number 4. Rule number 4, it's not who you know, it's who knows you. Now, we talked about social media, and I love social media again. And if you look at my social media accounts, you'll see that I'm connected to some really important and successful people. Folks who are on TV, folks who are making music that we all know. But if I ran into a lot of these people on the street and said, "Hey, don't you know me? I'm your Facebook friend," they probably look at me like I had a third eyeball in the middle of my forehead. Because I know them, but they don't know me. And so that's why it's important to make sure that you're developing quality, authentic relationships. Now, using LinkedIn as an example, because social media has been a great tool for us to build relationships that we hadn't been able to build face-to-face, to make connections with people that may not be in our direct proximity. But even in making those connections, we want to make sure that we're doing things that develop them into authentic relationships and not just connections. I'm on LinkedIn, and a lot of times I will get people who will inbox me and say, "Hey, I'd like to have lunch with you. I'd like to chat, and I want to just build my network." And I'll be honest with you, with the thousands of people that I'm connected to on LinkedIn, when I get those types of requests, if it's not somebody that I met before or have some type of connection to, we know somebody in common, or we just have some linkage, some connection, a lot of times I won't answer those requests. And it's not because I'm being rude, but I get a lot of them. And time is a valuable commodity. And so if we're asking for people to give us their time, then we need to invest in building that relationship. Because, in my eyes, when I see those requests, the first thing that I think is, well, you just want to sell me something, and I ain't buying it. So invest in building the relationships. If they start off online, look for ways to develop and build them offline. But it's still important to get that face time with folks. And one of the ways that you can do that is by identifying people who can serve as brand ambassadors for you. Because it's important for people, again, to know what you have to offer. But you don't want it to only be coming out of your own mouth. How wonderful is it when someone else can speak on your behalf and tell other people how wonderful you are? Isn't that great? If somebody tells you how great their product or service is, won't you put even more stock in it when you hear that from someone else? And so that's why it's important for you to have a brand ambassador or brand ambassadors. So what are some qualities of people that you may want to look at as you're identifying brand ambassadors? Well, one thing is that they may have a vested interest in the work that you're doing. So your brand ambassador may naturally be your supervisor, because if you're successful, then they're going to be successful, right? So they want to see you do well. Or it may be someone else in another department who your work is impacted by their work. It may be someone in your family. It may be someone who's been connected to you in some other way. But when you win, they win. So that's a vested interest. It may be someone who just personally wants to see you succeed. You meet someone at a conference and you really click, and that happens, your personalities gel and they like you, they think you're a wonderful person, and, they decide, all right, whatever you need, just let me know and I'll do it. And then your brand ambassadors may not always be people who are in positions of power. So listen to me carefully on this. When you're looking for brand ambassadors, also look for people who have influence. Now, influence is just as important and sometimes even more so than power. One of my greatest brand ambassadors early in my career was the secretary to the vice president. She held his calendar. She often let me know things that were happening that may not have trickled down to me. And when I did great things, she made sure that he heard about it, even if other people, if it hadn't gotten to him in other ways. Now, she didn't have the power or the authority to make things happen for me like that vice president did, but she had the ear of the vice president. She had influence. So keep that in mind as you're looking at your brand ambassadors. Now, another thing to do when it comes down to building those relationships, those authentic relationships, you want to make sure that you're managing your stakeholder relationships. And stakeholders are anybody who is impacted by what you do. So if you're an entrepreneur, your stakeholders are your customers or your clients. They may be your suppliers. They may be people that you're in some type of joint ventures with. If you're working in an organizational setting, your stakeholders are not just the people who are the direct beneficiaries of the work that you do, but other people who are impacted by it. And so what you want to do, and again, this is even a part of managing your personal brand, is making sure that you keep those stakeholders updated on what they need to know. And so from a tactical standpoint, because I don't like just taking these things from a philosophical standpoint. How do you do it? How do you put it to work for you? How do you make it a work process? So in a corporate setting, one of the things that you can do to make sure that you're keeping your stakeholders informed is literally sending email updates on some periodic basis. It could be weekly, it could be bi-weekly. We use one that we call a WAR, a weekly action report. And so to be able to just send some quick bullet points of this is what I'm working on, this is what I've accomplished, here are some of the challenges that we're running into. Because if you are running into challenges, you don't want to wait until you've missed the deadline or until you deliver a work product that isn't what is expected by your stakeholders. Because if you raise the issues earlier, there are people who may be able to fix the problems that you're having or to influence the outcome. But you have to keep them in the loop. And so that's one way that you can manage those stakeholder relationships. And, again, just figure out what frequency that those folks would want it. Don't over communicate. And one of the things that, you need to think about is this is where the golden rule doesn't apply. Do unto others as they want you to do unto them, not as you have them to do unto you. So you may be someone who likes all of the data and all the information you want, in the beginning to the book of Revelations, and everybody doesn't want all that information. So think about who your recipients of the information is and give them what they want. And if it's a mix, you've got some people that like, just the quick information, some people that like to deep delve, then default by giving just the quick bullets or just the quick bites so that people can see it, synthesize it, get what they need, but then offer a way for people that want additional detail to get that as well. Give them links to other documents or, give them, extend the opportunity for them to meet with you to get additional background or information. But the simpler you make it, the easier it will be to stick with it and to do it consistently. And then going back to, again, your manager and letting your work speak for itself. This is a way of making sure that someone is listening when it comes to what your work is saying, because now they have documented proof of what you've accomplished over the course of the year. And that brings us to our final rule, and that's rule number 5. Remember, it's not really about you. Now, when I asked myself that question in the beginning, why is it that some people succeed when other equally talented people don't? It wasn't just because I wanted to see this group of people make more money and buy bigger cars and have nicer houses. Yes, stuff is important and money is great, but it's not really about us. Because even if we're talking about stuff, how does that stuff add value to other people outside of us and even outside of our immediate family? And so when you look at the work that you do, you may say, oh, well, I just do PowerPoint presentations all day, or, I'm just, crunching numbers and data. But take a step back and think about the value of the work that you do and the impact that it has on the big picture. If you work for a company or an organization, what is that organization's purpose? What are they giving to the world? What problems are they solving? And then think about how the work that you do enables that company or your department to fulfill its mission. It's important. And if you can't see how your work connects to the bigger picture, then maybe it's time to start evaluating doing different work, because we all want to do work that matters and that has an impact. And if you can't see how it connects, then find some work that does. Because at the end of the day, it's about impact. It's not really about you. And another thing that we want to focus on is looking at ways that we can help other people to be successful. Even as we're building our relationships, if it's all about give me, help me, I need you to do for me, you're not going to have a strong relationship. But look for ways to help other people to get what they want, and you'll end up getting what you want. Now, if you've got any questions about anything that we've talked about here today, then on the back of your action guide, you've noticed that there was a place for your notes and a place to ask me questions. And so I encourage you to send those questions to me, and you can do that at Isha@epiphanyinstitute.com, or you can send them to me on social media as well. But I'd love to hear from you and to help you through anything that you may have been challenged with as you review this material. And I also told you that you were going to have some homework, right? So you've got those additional questions that you needed to answer. How can you use your tape to make a bigger difference at work, at home, and in your community? And then also on the back of your action guide, I ask you for your commitments. Now, we covered a lot of information here today, and I don't expect that you're going to immediately put everything that we've talked about into practice tomorrow. But I do expect that you will put something into practice as quickly as you can. And so before you walk away from this computer, I want you to sit down and write down your commitments. What will you do, even if it's one thing? What can you do? What can you take away from this time you've invested in this webinar today that is going to help you to build a strong, authentic personal brand that is going to allow you to make a bigger difference everywhere that you show up by using your tail of the tape? So write down that commitment. And I'd love to hear about that too. So if you want to share with me what your commitment is, I'd absolutely love to hear it. Now, I talked at the beginning about how life just really didn't go the way that I planned. I was voted most likely to succeed, ended up on welfare. Bounced back from that, started a great successful corporate career, got laid off. Started a great business. But even within the business, there have been lots of ups and lots of downs in there as well. And so what I want you to remember as you walk away today is that success is not determined by minimizing the obstacles, but success is determined by how you deal with the obstacles. And those obstacles may just be those things that help to broaden your tail of the tape by giving you great experiences that are going to be utilized to help other people in a very big way. So don't be afraid of those challenges. Don't necessarily run from them. Learn from them and turn them around so that other people can benefit as well. And I'd like to encourage you to please stay connected with me. You can do that on LinkedIn. You can do that on Facebook. You can do that on YouTube. And you can do that on Twitter. And of course,